Katie talks to me about her favorite roles to date, starting with the show that taught us all about
love and marriage.
Married with Children.
In 1987, the Bundys didn't just enter our living rooms, they kicked the door down and insulted the furniture. While the rest of TV was busy selling perfect families, Married with Children gave us a shoe salesman who hated his life and a wife who hated her stove. 40 years later, the anti-sitcom cast hasn't just survived, they've conquered Hollywood. From Emmy-winning dynasties to brave real-life battles, here is how the Bundy clan became unlikely industry royalty. But before Al Bundy could become a household name, he had to survive a pilot that almost didn't feature Ed O'Neill at all. Let's start from there. Ed O'Neill, from Polk High to Prestige TV. In the late 80s, Al Bundy wasn't just a character, he was a cultural radioactive spill. He was the man who scored 4 touchdowns in a single game for Polk High, only to spend the rest of his life smelling like feet and existential dread. For most actors, a role that iconic and that lowbrow is a career death sentence. It is the golden cage of typecasting.
Me too. And why don't you go upstairs and slip into a dry cleaning bag, see what that does for us?
But in 2026, as we look back at O'Neill's trajectory, it's clear he didn't just escape the cage. He rebuilt the entire zoo. The then was a gamble that nearly didn't happen. Before O'Neill was cast, the producers were looking for a wacky lead. But when Ed walked into the audition, he did something revolutionary. He simply sighed before entering the house. That sigh, the sound of a man who had already lost the war of life, got him the job. For 11 seasons, O'Neill played Al with a Shakespearean level of commitment to misery. He made the loser archetype aspirational for every man who felt squeezed by the grinding gears of the American dream. He was crude, he was politically incorrect, and he was, quite frankly, a titan of physical comedy. Whether he was fighting a rogue squirrel in the attic or trying to protect his no-ma'am sanctuary, O'Neill infused Al with a weird, stubborn dignity that prevented the character from becoming a mere caricature. However, the industry's now for O'Neill was far from guaranteed. When the show took its final bow in 1997, O'Neill was essentially radioactive to casting directors. They didn't see an actor. They saw a man in a blue short-sleeved shirt with his hand down his waistband. He spent the early 2000s trying to break the mold. He took a hard turn into drama, starring in the 2003 remake of Dragnet as Joe Friday and playing a recurring role as Governor Eric Baker in The West Wing. While he proved he had the chops, the shadow of the shoe store loomed large. Then came 2009, and the impossible happened. O'Neill landed the role of Jay Pritchett in Modern Family. It was a masterstroke of casting that played with his legacy rather than against it. Jay was, in many ways, the Al Bundy who made it. He was successful, he lived in a beautiful house, and he had a gorgeous wife, but he still had that same weary, skeptical side-eye for the world around him. This second act didn't just happen, it dominated. O'Neill earned 3 Emmy nominations and, more importantly, became the patriarch of the most successful sitcom of the 21st century. He is one of the few actors in history to lead 2 separate sitcoms that each ran for more than a decade. By 2024 and 2025, O'Neill had pivoted again, proving that his range extended into the darker corners of the human psyche. His portrayal of disgraced NBA owner Donald Sterling in the limited series Clipped was a revelation. He stripped away the lovable curmudgeon layer to show something much more sinister and pathetic, earning critical acclaim that many thought was reserved for the prestige actors who had never touched a laugh track. But what makes Ed O'Neill truly fascinating in 2026 isn't just his IMDb page, it's the man himself. There is a delicious irony in the fact that the man who played TV's most famous slob is actually a world-class athlete. O'Neill is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, having trained under Rory and Gracie for over 25 years. He often jokes that receiving his black belt was the greatest achievement of his life, even over his acting accolades. It's a testament to the discipline that allowed him to navigate the fickle waters of Hollywood for 4 decades. Today, O'Neill sits atop a mountain of Bundy money and Pritchett equity, but he remains remarkably grounded. He hasn't forgotten the character that gave him everything. In recent 2026 interviews, he speaks of Al with a surprising amount of tenderness, acknowledging that in a world of increasingly polished and fake social media personas, Al Bundy's brutal honesty is more refreshing than ever. He has transitioned into the elder statesman phase of his career, currently attached to a high-profile 2027 film project that marks his first foray into sci-fi, proving that even at 80, he isn't done surprising us. Ed O'Neill didn't just play a shoe salesman. He sold us on the idea that you can be a loser and still be a legend. He took the Bundy curse and turned it into a blueprint for how to age with grace, humor, and a very dangerous set of martial arts skills. While Ed was busy redefining the American dad, his on-screen wife was proving that a lazy housewife could actually be the hardest-working woman in show business. Katie Sagal, the red-haired phoenix. If Ed O'Neill was the anchor of Married with Children, Katie Sagal was its lightning rod. As Peggy Bundy, Sagal created a visual icon so potent it nearly swallowed her whole. With the towering red bouffant, the spandex leggings, and that signature hip-swinging Bundy strut, she personified a hilarious rebellion against the domestic expectations of the 80s. Peggy didn't cook, she didn't clean, and she certainly didn't mother in any traditional sense. She was a satirical grenade thrown into the heart of the American kitchen. Yet, as we stand in 2026, looking back at Sagal's trajectory, it is clear that Peggy was merely the first of many skins this chameleon would shed. The past of Sagal's career was actually rooted in music, not comedy. Before she ever stepped onto the set of 9764 Jeopardy Lane, Sagal was a powerhouse vocalist. She was a harlot for Bette Midler and sang backup for legends like Bob Dylan and Gene Simmons. It was this musicality, the timing, the rhythm, the voice that she brought to Peggy. Sagal famously came into her audition with her own idea for the character's look, raiding the wardrobe for 60s gone wrong attire to ensure Peggy was a woman trapped in her own high school glory days. For 11 years, she leaned into the Peggy persona so convincingly that the world forgot she was actually a sophisticated, classically trained performer. When the show ended, Sagal faced a wall. The industry couldn't see past the spandex. However, her first major pivot came not through her face, but through her voice. In 1999, she landed the role of Turanga Leela, the one-eyed, no-nonsense pilot in Matt Groening's Futurama.
Ugh, Mom, I hate to break it to you, but Zap's a jerk. The truth is,
Leela was the antithesis of Peggy, competent, tough, and deeply moral. This role didn't just provide a paycheck, it proved Sagal's versatility. By the time Futurama became a cult phenomenon, eventually being revived multiple times through 2024 and 2025, Sagal had already established herself as a titan of voice acting. She gave Leela a soul that anchored the show's sci-fi absurdity, proving that she could command a room with nothing but a microphone. But the true now moment, the one that redefined her for a new generation, was Sons of Anarchy. From 2008 to 2014, Sagal played Gemma Teller-Morrow, the terrifying Machiavellian matriarch of an outlaw motorcycle club. It was a role written for her by her husband, Kurt Sutter, and it earned her a Golden Globe that many felt was long overdue. Gemma was the anti-Peggy. Where Peggy was harmlessly lazy, Gemma was lethally proactive. She was the Lady Macbeth of the highway, and Sagal played her with a ferocious, bone-chilling intensity that finally burned the image of the big red hair out of the public's collective memory. By 2026, Sagal has achieved a level of elder stateswoman status in Hollywood.
Today, Hollywood honors Katie Sagal.
That few sitcom stars ever reach. She has spent the last few years bridging the gap between comedy and drama with effortless grace. Her role as Louise Goldovsky in The Conners, the spin-off of Roseanne, saw her stepping into another legendary sitcom universe and making it her own. She provided the show with a grounded, mature, romantic foil for Dan Connor, proving that she could still hold the center of a multi-cam sitcom without relying on the Peggy tropes of old. Beyond the screen, Sagal's 2026 status is defined by her resilience and her return to her first love, music. She has released several albums over the last decade, and her recent Unplugged tour in 2025 saw her playing to sold-out venues, blending storytelling with soul-stirring blues and folk. She has become an advocate for health and wellness, speaking openly about her past struggles with substance abuse and the tragedies she faced during the married, with children years, including the loss of a child during the show's run, a heartbreaking reality that the show's writers handled with surprising sensitivity by writing it out as a dream. In 2026, Katie Sagal stands as a symbol of the long game. She didn't let Peggy Bundy define her. She used Peggy as a springboard to become one of the most decorated and respected dramatic actresses of her era. Whether she is voicing a futuristic cyclops, ruling a biker gang, or navigating the complexities of a working-class family in Illinois, Sagal brings a raw, authentic humanity to everything she touches. She has navigated the transition from 90s bombshell to 2020's icon with a dignity that is, frankly, the most un-Peggy thing about her. She remains a firebrand, a vocalist, and a survivor, the red-haired phoenix who proved there is plenty of life after the sitcom's suburban sprawl. While Katie was busy ruling the roost and the roads, her on-screen daughter was embarking on a journey of her own, one that would take her from the blonde to the very pinnacle of Hollywood bravery. Christina Applegate, the icon of resilience. If Kelly Bundy was the face of the 90s ditzy blonde trope, Christina Applegate was the brain behind the operation. It is one of the great ironies of television history that it took a character with famously low intelligence to introduce the world to one of its smartest, most resilient performers. In 2026, Applegate is no longer defined by the miniskirts and malapropisms of her youth. She has become the industry's North Star for grace under pressure, transforming her personal health battles into a powerful legacy of advocacy and artistic reinvention. The Before was a whirlwind of teenage superstardom. Cast at just 15 years old, Christina didn't just play Kelly, she weaponized the character's airhead persona with a comic timing that rivaled seasoned veterans.
So, if anybody calls and accuses me of locking the driver in the bathroom and taking the bus on a joyride...
While the scripts often called for Kelly to be the butt of the joke, Applegate gave her a street-smart edge and a fierce loyalty to her family that made her impossible to dislike. She was the breakout star of the Fox network, a grunge queen before the term existed, who spent her hiatuses starring in cult classics like Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. For a decade, she was the quintessential American TV daughter, but even then, there were glimpses of the powerhouse actress waiting to break free. The now of Christina's career is a masterclass in the second act. After the Bundys moved out, she navigated a successful film career, most notably as the formidable Veronica Corningstone in Anchorman, and returned to television with hits like Samantha Who. However, her defining artistic moment arrived with the Netflix series Dead to Me. As Jen Harding, Applegate delivered a performance so raw, angry, and hilarious that it felt like a culmination of 30 years of craft. It was during the filming of the show's final season in 2021 that she received the diagnosis that would change everything: multiple sclerosis, MS. In true Bundy fashion, she didn't retreat, she fought. She insisted on finishing the series, often being literally held up by her co-star and soul sister, Linda Cardellini. Her 2024 appearance at the Emmys, walking with a cane and receiving a thunderous standing ovation, was a watershed moment for disability visibility in Hollywood. By 2026, Applegate has pivoted her career with the same sharp intelligence she used to hide behind Kelly's blank stares. Having stepped away from on-camera acting, she has become a titan of the audio era, co-hosting the hit podcast Messy with fellow MS warrior Jamie Lynn Sigler. The show has become a global phenomenon, offering a brutally honest, hilariously dark look at living with chronic illness. But perhaps her most significant 2026 milestone is the release of her memoir, You with the Sad Eyes. The book, which has dominated the bestseller lists since its March release, chronicles her journey from a tumultuous childhood in Laurel Canyon to the heights of fame, her 2008 battle with breast cancer, and her current life with MS. It's a book that mirrors her acting style, unflinching, witty, and deeply human. She has also remained the emotional glue for the married and with children family, spearheading the 2026 reunion benefit for the Race to Erase MS, where she famously joked that she was still the only one who could pull off the Kelly Bundy hair, even if the legs were a bit wobbly. Christina Applegate is the rare star who outgrew her icon status to become something much more vital, a hero. She proved that you could lose your mobility, but never your voice, and that the dumb blonde from Polk High was actually the toughest person in the room all along. As Christina was showing the world the true meaning of strength, her on-screen brother was busy building a secret empire in the Los Angeles underground, proving that Bud Bundy was always playing a much longer game than we realized. David Faustino, the Grand Master of the Underground. While the rest of the Bundy clan was navigating the bright lights of mainstream superstardom,
so we're chilling backstage at the affiliate ball. I got my bud behind me right here with David Faustino. What's up, y'all?
David Faustino was busy becoming the most interesting man in the room, usually a room filled with smoke, bass, and the architects of 90s West Coast hip-hop. In 2026, Faustino remains a fascinating anomaly. The former child star who managed to stay relevant not by chasing his old fame, but by reinventing himself as a titan of voice acting and a guardian of Hollywood's hip-hop history. The then was, of course, Bud Bundy. As the youngest member of the family, David had the difficult task of playing the smart one who was simultaneously the biggest loser with women. But midway through the show's run, something shifted. Bud became Grandmaster B. What many fans didn't realize at the time was that this wasn't just a writer's room gag. It was a direct reflection of David's real-life obsession. While filming one of the most popular sitcoms in the world, Faustino was simultaneously running Ballistics, the first hip-hop nightclub on the Sunset Strip.
I wanted to touch, obviously this is a, a music-themed show that we do here. We get into a lot of hip-hop, but we also play...
It was a legendary 2-year lightning strike of culture, where a teenage David was hosting freestyle battles between a young will.i.am and Exhibit, while Eazy-E and Ice Cube watched from the VIP booths. He wasn't just a sitcom kid. He was a gatekeeper for the genre's mainstream explosion. When the show folded in 1997, Faustino chose a path of creative autonomy that defines his now. He famously leaned into his former child star status with the web series Starving, a brutally honest, darkly comedic take on life after a hit show that predated the meta-comedy trend by years. But his most significant professional evolution happened in the recording booth. In 2012, he landed the role of Mako in The Legend of Korra, the sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender. As the brooding, fire-bending heart of the series, Faustino proved he had a vocal range and emotional depth that went far beyond the laugh track. To an entire generation of fans born after Married, with children went off the air, he isn't Bud Bundy. He is the voice of a hero. By 2026, Faustino has effectively become the glue of the Bundy legacy. He has been the most vocal advocate for the long-gestating animated revival, which saw a major development spike in 2024 and 2025 before hitting corporate speed bumps. Even as streamers play tug-of-war with the rights, Faustino has kept the fire alive. frequently appearing on high-profile podcasts like Braving the Elements and 90s, to now to bridge the gap between his sitcom past and his animation present. Most impressively, 2026 has seen Faustino take center stage as a producer and historian. His documentary project on the ballistics era, currently in late-stage production, is set to be the definitive look at the intersection of TV fame and 90s rap culture. He's also remained fiercely loyal to his TV family. In January 2026, he was the primary organizer for the An Evening with the Bundys benefit at the Wiltern, proving that while Bud might have always been looking for an out from the Bundy house, David has never stopped appreciating the foundation it built. He is the grand master of his own destiny, a man who proved that you can grow up in a shoe salesman's shadow and still find your own light in the booth. While David was masterminding the underground, the people next door were proving that being a neighbor was just the opening act for careers that would span from Broadway stages to the director's chair. The neighbors, Marcy, Steve, and the pretty boy. In the suburban ecosystem of married, with children, the neighbors weren't just foils. They were the essential friction that kept the Bundy fire burning. If Al and Peggy were the chaos, the Rhodes and the Darcys were the order that constantly found itself corrupted by the Bundy gravity. But as we look at their status in 2026, it's clear that being a neighbor was simply a high-profile launchpad for three of the most diverse careers in the industry. Amanda Bearse, Marcy Rhodes/Darcy, was the quintessential TV antagonist, the chicken-legged feminist whose verbal sparring matches with Al Bundy are the stuff of sitcom legend. But while Marcy was busy fighting for gender equality in the suburbs, Amanda Bearse was quietly becoming one of the most powerful women behind the camera. During the show's run, she began directing episodes, eventually helming over 30 of them. This wasn't a vanity project. It was a career pivot that led her to direct massive hits like Dharma and Greg, Reba, and The Jamie Foxx Show. In 2026, Bearse is celebrated as a pioneer.
A bus instructor looks at me, "You want to do this?" I said, "Not really." He said, "No, worst idea I ever heard."
One of the first major TV stars to come out as gay during the height of her fame in the early 90s. Today, she balances her time between directing indie projects and mentoring a new generation of LGBTQ+ creators, having recently made a triumphant return to the screen in the 2022 rom-com Bros. Then there is David Garrison, Steve Rhodes, the straight man whose descent into the Bundy madness provided the show's early seasons with its best cringe comedy. Garrison famously left the show in 1990, a move that would have been career suicide for most. But for Garrison, it was a return to his true calling, the stage. By 2026, he has arguably the most prestigious now of the entire cast. He is a Broadway deity, having originated the role of the wizard in the global phenomenon Wicked. While fans still recognize him as Steve, the theater world knows him as a Tony-nominated powerhouse. Even in the mid-20s, Garrison continues to grace the boards, recently appearing in a high-profile 2025 revival of Sweeney Todd, proving that while Steve Rhodes may have run off to become a forest ranger, David Garrison became a king of the Great White Way. Finally, we have Ted McGinley, Jefferson Darcy, the man often jokingly accused of being the show killer because he joined so many series just before they ended. On Married with Children, however, he did the opposite. He gave the show a second wind of vacuous, pretty boy energy that perfectly countered Al's cynicism. In 2026, McGinley has undergone a massive critical resurgence. No longer just the guy from Happy Days or Revenge of the Nerds, he has found a home in prestige dramedies. His 2024 to 2025 run on the Apple TV Plus hit, Shrinking, showed a vulnerable, comedic depth that shocked critics who had previously dismissed him as a jawline with hair. At nearly 70, McGinley is working more than ever, proving that the Darcy charm was always backed by genuine, enduring talent. Together, these three didn't just play the people next door. They built legacies that outshone the white picket fences of the 90s, proving there was life, and a lot of it, beyond the Bundy driveway. But the Bundy world wasn't just limited to the main players. It was a revolving door of before they were famous icons, and a certain four-legged star who stole every scene he was in. The Lost Bundys and Famous Faces. If you watch the Married with Children pilot today, you are seeing a piece of history that was nearly erased. Most fans don't realize that the Kelly and Bud we know and love, Christina Applegate and David Faustino, were not the original actors cast in the roles. In the unaired pilot, Kelly was played by Tina Kasperi and Bud by Hunter Carson. After the episode was shot, Ed O'Neill famously sat the producers down and delivered a hard truth. The chemistry was off. He felt the children didn't quite match the cynical, sharp-edged energy he and Katie Sagal were cultivating.
One episode?
We're paying for the pilot. If this thing doesn't kick off, this will never see the light of day.
The roles were recast, the pilot was reshot, and the rest is sitcom history. Kasperi and Carson effectively became the Ghost Bundys, a fascinating what-if in the annals of TV casting. But the recasting was just the beginning of the show's legendary relationship with guest stars. Long before they were household names, a staggering number of future A-listers cut their teeth in the Bundy living room. A teenage Mila Jovovich appeared as a French exchange student who turned the Bundy household upside down, while a pre-Friends Matt LeBlanc appeared not once, but 3 times as Kelly's boyfriend, Vinny Verducci, even starring in 2 failed spin-offs centered on his character. Pamela Anderson made her mark in 2 different episodes, once as a dream girl and later as an actual character, just as her Baywatch stardom was beginning to ignite. Even Fergie, long before her Black Eyed Peas days, appeared as an enthusiastic fan in the 1994 episode Nooner or Later. And then there was the undisputed king of the household, Buck the dog. Played by a Briard named Mike, Buck was the show's cynical, 4-legged philosopher. His thought-overs, voiced by Kevin Curran and Cheech Marin, provided the show with some of its most biting meta-commentary. Mike played Buck for 9 seasons until his retirement in 1995, and his death was written into the show in the heart-wrenching and characteristically weird episode Requiem for a Dead Briard. In a bizarre twist that feels perfectly aligned with the show's dark humor, Mike didn't just fade away after his real-life passing in 1996. According to Hollywood legend, and confirmed by taxidermy historians in 2025, Mike was actually freeze-dried by the famous Bischoff's taxidermy. It's a strange, slightly macabre postscript for a dog who spent a decade proving that being a Bundy was a rough life, even for the family pet. With the legacy of the Ghost Bundys and freeze-dried pets behind us, there is only one question left. In the age of reboots and revivals, is there still a seat for the Bundys on the 2026 cultural couch? The 2026 status, the animated dream. As we navigate the mid-2000s, the cultural footprint of Married with Children feels less like a nostalgic footnote and more like a prophetic blueprint. In an era of highly polished, perfect digital personas, the Bundys' brand of unapologetic, gritty honesty has aged like a fine, albeit slightly sour wine. However, the road to a formal 2026 revival has been as bumpy as Al Bundy's Dodge. For the last few years, the holy grail for fans has been the proposed animated reboot. The premise was brilliant, a modern-day continuation that saw the Bundys relocated to a sinkhole-adjacent home in Florida, warring with HOA snobs and navigating the shady sunshine of the South. With the original core 4, Ed, Katie, Christina, and David all officially signed on to voice their characters, and Family Guy veteran Alex Carter at the helm, it seemed like a guaranteed hit. David Faustino even confirmed in late 2025 that a pilot episode had been recorded, describing it as raunchier and edgier than the original live-action run. Yet, in a move that felt like a classic Bundy stroke of bad luck,
because that was Norman Lear's company, Embassy Television.
Sony Pictures Television officially halted development on the series in July 2025. Despite the cast's enthusiasm, industry insiders suggested that the high production costs of premium animation and complex rights issues involving the estate of co-creator Ron Levitt created a stalemate. While Sony insists the intellectual property remains critically important, the animated series currently sits in a shelved limbo that would make Al Bundy sigh with familiar resignation. But if the Bundys taught us anything, it's that you don't need a corporate greenlight to stage a comeback. On January 28, 2026, the cast proved their enduring power by reuniting live at the Wiltern Theater in Los Angeles for An Evening with the Bundys. The sold-out event wasn't just a trip down memory lane, it was a powerful fundraiser for Race to Erase MS, a cause spearheaded by Christina Applegate.
When I first read the script, I couldn't believe that they were going to put something like that on television.
Seeing the four of them on stage together, receiving thunderous Bundy, Bundy chants from a crowd that spanned 3 generations, was a reminder that their chemistry isn't tied to a script or a network. It is a genuine, lifelong bond. Today, the legacy of the show is being preserved through a new lens. It is no longer dismissed as low-brow trash. It is studied as the show that paved the way for the anti-hero and the honest depiction of the working-class struggle. In 2026, the Bundys represent a defiant kind of resilience. They lost every week, they were perpetually broke, and they genuinely annoyed one another, yet they never left the couch. They stayed together. In a fractured modern world, that stubborn loyalty to one's own dysfunctional tribe is the most radical lesson Al Bundy ever taught us. The shoe store may be closed, but the Bundys are still standing, probably complaining about the weather, but standing nonetheless. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on more deep dives into your favorite TV icons. Thanks for supporting us.